Good morning, small baby humans. This is In Case You Missed American History for February 23rd, 2021. If you're watching this, that means you couldn't make it to class today, either in person, A through L, or online, the rest of you. And that's okay. Maybe something came up. Maybe you weren't feeling well this morning. Maybe you got confused about what time class was supposed to start. I wrote it on my board so I wouldn't get lost. Anyway, I hope you're well. I hope those around you are well. And I hope yesterday, if you came to school, it wasn't too traumatic for you, because it was, I don't know, it was off. It was weird. I wish you guys got to have a little bit more normal. But anyway, I'm going to run you through what we did today in class. Basically, we, did the beginning of class stuff. Then we went through a few slides on the Great Depression, and then I gave them some work time on the assignment that is due tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday, okay? All right, so title slide, the Great Depression. Obviously, you know what class you're in. That's a pretty famous picture from the Great Depression of a woman and her children, obviously down on their luck, trying to, just kind of look at pictures and try to think of, like, what are people thinking? What are they feeling? What's going on in that situation. So we're going to look at the Great Depression today. We're going to talk mostly about the beginnings of it. We're going to kind of get from the 1929 to the 1932 election. And then tomorrow, like I said, we're going to kind of wrap things up. I know that probably, if you're watching out in YouTube land, I apologize. We're crunched for time. We want to get to the modern era. Don't comment. Anyway, here we go. So the Great Depression is, well, it's called the Great Depression because it's probably the worst economic time period in American, and I don't want to say global history, because I know that there were probably times that were way worse back in whenever and wherever. But the Great Depression is probably the worst financial issue of modern times. And it sticks in the memory of people because it still impacts the way that we live our lives today. And it changed the way, I think, governments work for people who maybe need more help for short periods of time and long periods of time. So the Depression itself lasted from 1929 to, you see 1937, you see 1938, you see, we always go with 1941. And maybe that's me cheating and saying, okay, we're going to go from the late October 1929 stock market fiasco to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because it kind of puts it in a neat little package. I'm not going to get in a huge debate with people about what year it actually ended or if it actually ended. Somebody tried to hit me with that one once. But I'm going to say 29 to 41. Okay. Now, leading up to this, the 1920s had been a pretty different time. Things had gone relatively well. For some people, they had more money than they'd ever seen, or were making more money than they ever had. But one of the problems is they spent that money really quickly. When I was a kid and I'd get birthday money, my dad used to ask me if my pockets were on fire because I wanted to go to the store right away and spend my money. So people spent money quickly. When they got it, they went out and bought the new thing. They went to the talking picture at the end of the 20s. But people didn't really save much. They weren't putting money aside. There wasn't that concept that maybe, I should save a little in case something goes wrong, or what if I lost my job? Because everything was going relatively well. And so the people that had money didn't really worry too much. People that didn't have enough money, or didn't have as much money as they would like to have, they were still able to go out and buy items on the installment plan. Now, we talked about that one in the last unit. The installment plan is where you can buy something now and pay for it later. Kind of like a car, okay? Except you could do that for washers and dryers and things like that. They didn't have credit cards. You didn't go in and scan. You had store credit through the store, and you could buy things. People even did it with groceries. And the installment plan works really well as long as you have a job and you're getting a consistent paycheck and you can make your payments. If you were to lose your job, you're going to have a problem. All right. But people in the 20s generally could pay their bills because they had a job and things were going relatively well for them. A lot of people, about 3 million people, as a matter of fact, bought stock. Okay. There were a lot of rich people who owned stock. And there were a lot of middle-class people who looked at the rich and said, okay, what do they have that I don't have? Okay, they have tons of money. Yeah, got it. Okay, they got a big house. I got a house. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, they have stock. And stock was such a big deal in the 1920s that they put the stock report on the front page of the paper. A lot of times now there's a separate business section, or it's like at the end of the sports page. But back then it's the front page. The front page is the big deal. It's where the big story is. And the stock market was kind of this thing that, because financially the country was doing well, it just always seemed to go up. It was like a roller coaster in that early stage. It's clicking up the hill. It's a lottery ticket that always seems to win. Now, you might only win a buck or two, but you could win 500. You could win 50,000. You could, oh, my lights went off. Hang on. You could win, I don't know, you could win the jackpot. You could win $1 billion. And so people saw buying stock as this way to enhance their money or to even get rich quick. The problem was, you're not going to get rich buying one share of GameStop. Actually, you could make a decent amount of cash on that a few weeks ago. But people started doing this thing called buying on the margin. It's basically the installment plan, but with stock over a much shorter term. You pay for a little bit of the stock, you borrow the rest of the money from the stockbroker, and then you had 5 to 10-ish days to pay back what you owed. And so what you did is you bought stock. I don't know, you bought like a $10 stock, and you paid for like $3 of it, and you borrowed 7. And the stock would go up like, I don't know, buck, 50 cents, whatever, over the course of the week. You'd sell it, you'd pay back what you owed, and then you'd have that money, your dividend, that you might reinvest or you might take. Now, the problem was stockbrokers didn't have enough money to be able to just be lending everybody who went and bought stock like this money. So they went to the banks for loans, and the banks were like, oh, what's your collateral? And the banks said, or in the brokers said, well, I have stock. And they went, oh, okay, here's money. Okay. Now, margin buying works. You borrow, you pay back. You borrow, you pay back in what's called a bull market. Now, there's two kinds of markets. There's a bull market and there's a bear market. And the way that I always remember them is, the part of a bull that's dangerous is the horns, and the horns point up. And so a bull market is a stock market that's always going up. So if the stock market's always going up, you buy and borrow, you wait a few days, you sell, you make a little bit of money, you pay the person back, you do the same thing next week. And gradually you can build up, maybe it goes really fast, but gradually you can build up some extra money, and you don't really have to do anything. The problem is, though, if you do this in something called a bear market, bear's claws are what get you, and bear's claws point down. You borrow money. Okay, so you borrow money. Things are going okay. Now you borrow money, and now the stock goes like this. You don't have a profit to pay back what you borrowed. And now that stockbroker might not be able to pay the bank back. And banks lend out money by using your savings account and the money in my checking account and all those different kinds of things. So like, things could go wrong, but they hadn't. They had no reason to worry. Man, every day I've woke up, the sky has never been blood red. It's never happened. I don't have to worry about it. But it could happen. All right. And it did. The darkest days of the Depression were probably actually in the 1930s, but there are 2 days in particular that stand out when historians talk about the beginning of the Depression, and that's Black Thursday, October 24th, 1929, and Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. I remember things. All right. And so in that late October, stock prices began to plummet. They went into a bear market. And there's a lot of reasons why I will get to on another slide, but then it causes a spiral that pulls in, a downward spiral that pulls in a lot of people. Okay. And so that downward spiral kind of, people think it starts with the stock market and we'll work from there, but it's not the only thing. By mid-November, about $15 billion had been lost. Now, not all of that wasn't real money. If I buy GameStop for $5 and it goes up to 600 and then it goes back down to 5, did I really lose any money? It's not like they burnt $15 billion in the middle of the street. Regardless, the stock market goes down by $15 billion total. This impacts global markets. Germany goes into depression. Japan goes into depression. Places all over Europe have the same thing happen because all the stock markets affect each other. But what really happens is all those people who are buying on the margin couldn't afford to pay back what they had borrowed. And now the stockbroker couldn't pay back the bank. The bank started to run out of money. People panicked. They went to the bank and they took out their money. And when the bank ran out of money, they closed. And if you didn't get there in time, your money was gone. There was no whatever. If your parents were saving up money for college and they had, I don't know, $10,000 saved up and the bank closed in 1929, you never got that money back. It was gone. So if you deposited your last paycheck yesterday and the bank closed today, it's over. Money's gone. Between 1929 and 1932, about 5,000 banks fail. Now, I don't know the exact number of people that impacted, but you think about F&M Bank in Marshall or Avestar, however you say it. If those two banks closed, think about how that would affect people in Marshall in 1929. Now, it doesn't work that way anymore, okay? And so people that had money became really protective of it. They wouldn't spend it. There are stories about people burying jars of money in their backyard or walling money up in their house, like actually putting it in the walls. Regardless, though, when people don't spend money, that causes deflation and prices drop, sales drop, and the business is going to go, because if people aren't buying things, no new products are being bought. So there's no need for production. And if the toaster company isn't selling any toasters and they don't need to make toasters, do they need the toaster manufacturers, the workers in the factory? The answer is no. And eventually, a number of businesses close. As a matter of fact, 100,000 businesses close and 12 million jobs are lost. It doesn't impact everybody the same way. When business owners are looking to get rid of people, they get rid of women, and then they get rid of minorities, and they get rid of the white male last because the white male is the breadwinner and the owner of the factory looks like them. But the other thing is it doesn't hit everybody. If you were a rural farmer, the depression might not hit you that hard. If you were poor and the factory that you worked at still stayed open, you were probably fine. And there are people that lived in parts of the country where their jobs were literally unaffected. But the people that did get affected, they were in some cases just absolutely wiped out. A lot of people start looking for somebody to blame. And the obvious target, because this is what we do, is they blame the president of the United States at that time, a guy named Herbert Hoover. Now, the Depression was not Herbert Hoover's fault, but he definitely did not have the response to the Depression that a lot of people would have liked him to have had. One more slide. All right, so the causes of the Depression. What really happened? The reality of things, I'm just going to stand up to make sure my lights don't turn off again. The reality of things is that there were a lot of different causes, a lot. I'm going to go through 5, okay? There's probably 500, all right? The first one is overproduction. Factories were making too much of stuff. And because of that, eventually there was going to be a crash for that factory. If this water bottle company makes 2 billion of these, they're not going to be able to sell them all. They're going to sit in a warehouse. They're going to have to let people go. And then eventually, if they don't sell any, the business closes and they have to let everybody go. Well, that's a problem, obviously, because that's jobs. That's profit, money moving through the system. The person that works at the store or Amazon that sold me this bottle helps have a job. But the other thing is this company may be on the stock market. And when this company closes, everybody who's invested in waterbottles.com, okay, they can lose what they've got. And so companies recklessly just producing with no idea what might happen in the future becomes a huge problem. A second major cause is overborrowing. Okay, we all know this. People have credit cards. You can go out and on your, I don't know, you graduate from college, you graduate from high school, you move out on your own, and you decide you need the best stuff. And so you get all these credit cards, you buy a 80-inch TV and whatever game systems, and you go out and get new couches, and you get new appliances, and you can charge. And it's great because you have that first job. You're an electrician, you're a teacher, you're a biologist, you're whatever it is that you decide to do, and life is good. You make those payments, and maybe you're making the payments, and maybe you don't have enough money to save. So you just make the payments. You got the stuff. Man, my TV's beautiful. Look at me game. Oh my God, my food is so cold. What happens if your car breaks down? You don't have the money to fix it. What happens if your job is a teacher or an electrician or a plumber or a mechanic or whatever? They look at you and go, hey, we're sorry, business isn't going well. We're going to have to let you go. Now what do you do? Now, can you pay for the TV? Can you pay for things? What happens to your credit card? What happens to your credit? Okay, I don't know if you guys know what credit is. Maybe we'll have to talk about that another day. Hopefully they talk about that in personal finance. I think they do. Another major cause is the wealth gap. The rich are so rich and the poor are so poor that causes problems in the country. Another issue is that the middle class is there, but they're the people that are over borrowing. They're the people that are buying stock on the margin. They're the people that stand to lose their jobs working in factories or the small stores that they own if people don't buy. Obviously, we talked about the stock market tanking. That affects a lot of people. When the stock market goes, whoop, boom, it hits a lot of people really hard. Okay. And last but not least, there weren't any government policies for any of this stuff. There was no way to fix any of it. There was no, like, what happens when the stock market goes wrong? What happens when a bank closes? What happens when, the people become unemployed? What happens when blah, blah? There was no thought about any of that. Okay. So that was a lot in one day, but like I said, we're having to kind of plow through a few things so we can spend more time on things at the back end of the class. So use the rest of the time today to work on the assignment if you want to. It's due on Wednesday. If you have any questions, please let me know. Talk to you soon.